In this clip, we are going to be studying the 3 lines of defense. So, what is your immune system composed of? The immune system is made up of 3 lines of defense: the first line, second line, and third line of defense. So, in this clip, we're going to be looking at what comprises each of those different lines. So let's start with the first line of defense, and for that you can think of anything related to physical protection. So let's start to talk about a few of those physical components of your human body that are going to protect you. And of course, you're probably thinking of skin, right? So the integument. Skin is going to offer you your first line of protection, and then you can also think of the rest of the integumentary system. So things like hair, nails would also fall under this category. In addition, we also have mucus secretions. And so mucus also acts to protect you. Next up, cilia, little hair-like projections that are projecting out of the, for example, epithelial tissue or epithelial cell, and they function to propel substances. For example, lining your respiratory tract, they're going to propel substances up and away from your lungs. Another component that falls under your first line of defense is acidity. So acid secretions, for example, in the stomach or the vagina, they're going to serve again for protection. Another example is lysozyme. This is an enzyme that you would find in secretions. So secretions such as sweat, also found in earwax, in tears. All right, and it functions to kill bacteria, so it is going to protect you, and it belongs to the first line of defense. So next up, let's go ahead and look at what falls under the second line of defense. So here you want to think more along the lines of cellular components. So the cells that are responsible to protect you, such as macrophages, such as some of your white blood cells, so neutrophils. Also, we have the basophils, eosinophils. Right, so these are examples of white blood cells that are going to fall under the second line of defense. See, these are the granulocytes, if you remember from the blood chapter. And we also have natural killer cells. Right, so these are going to also fight off infected cells. Another component that belongs to the second line is phagocytosis. Right, engulfing, eating up harmful or foreign substances for protection. Also, inflammation. Okay, so when the first line of defense, let's say, is compromised, for example, if there's a cut or a lesion in the skin, that's when inflammation kicks up. So that's when you have the second line of defense kicking in to protect you. So signs and hallmarks of inflammation would be redness, heat, swelling, and pain. And then next up under second line of defense is fever. Okay, so fever is again another example of a protective mechanism under the second line of defense. Okay, so fever is beneficial. It's going to increase your body temperature in order to increase body's metabolism. So it's going to speed up the repair process, and it is also going to be an unfavorable environment for bacteria or viruses. It's going to stop them from replicating this high temperature. So stops bacterial replication. All right. And then finally, under our third line of defense, here we have what we call the B lymphocytes or the B cells, as well as the T lymphocytes or the T cells. And so these two also are types of leukocytes or white blood cells, but they are the agranulocytes, right? And so they fall under the third line of defense. We are going to go into much more detail about the function of B cells versus T cells. However, for now, we'll just refer to B lymphocyte immunity as humoral immunity, which means that it's going to attack extracellular substances, so anything outside an infected cell, and it does that using antibodies. And then we have the T lymphocytes, and these are the ones responsible for cellular immunity, meaning that they are responsible for killing off infected cells or cancer cells. So when it's a cell that needs to be targeted, that's when the T lymphocytes are involved. And if it's an extracellular antigen or pathogen that needs to be targeted, that's when the humoral immunity and the B lymphocytes kick in. The last part about this clip is that I'm just going to mention that the first line and the second line of defense, these fall under the category that we refer to as innate immunity. Okay, so innate immunity includes the first and second line of defense, and you are born with it. It's also non-specific, and it is a localized effect. So local effect, non-specific, and it also has no memory. Okay, no memory formation. However, if we compare this to the third line of defense, this is known as adaptive or acquired immunity. Okay? And so this compares to the innate immunity in that it is very specific compared to the non-specific innate immunity. So this means that immunity for one disease does not equal immunity to another disease. So it is very specific to the pathogen that it is targeting. It is also systemic, meaning that the effect is going to be all throughout the body instead of a localized effect like inflammation, for example, for innate. And finally, this includes memory. And so this means that if you are re-exposed to the same pathogen, the immune response is going to be much quicker the second time around, and that is because of memory formation or memory cells that form after the first exposure. Okay, and so we're going to be elaborating on this later on. Okay, but for now, it's important to note that there are the three lines of defense, first, second, and third, and make sure you know what comprises each of those lines.